Hi, this is Eric Humphrey, and together with Dwight Zimler, we've just completed a book, Growth, Modernity, and the Nations of Wealth, that deals with the mysterious question of how the West became so wealthy and so modern. I was going to jump into the chapter summaries in these presentations, but we've been getting a lot of very good questions on some of the topics in the book. And one of those topics is the book takes issue with the standard historical treatment of the rise of modernity as a succession of chronological inputs. We don't think this is satisfactory. It's not really an explanation because it's not the inputs that you get in their cumulative summation, but how they're used by cultures. So I'm going to go back to a section of the book where we talk about these inputs that have contributed to the modern world, but are used very differently in modern hands. For example, we use the analogy, if I toss a knife into a senior citizen's bingo parlor or into a barroom brawl, it's going to have a very different effect. So it's not the inputs that you have. Similarly, if you toss calculus into the ancient world or into the modern world, it's not going to be used the same way. In the book, we tell the story of it dying in the classical world and being taken up in the modern world. All the gold and silver that Spain plundered from the New World, and there was plenty of plundering, did not make it rich and modern, but underwrote a reactionary regime and helped Spain sit out the Enlightenment. Spain was a marginal power by the 18th century. So we want to take a few real examples that we use in the book, but we unfortunately didn't include pictures, of the astrolabe as an instrument that has both an ancient and a modern lineage or use, and the compass. This is a World War I American compass. And we want to show you that just like the knife, if you toss these into different motivational structures of history, you'll get very different kinds of results. So let's just look at the astrolabe for a moment. So this has become kind of an icon of classical learning. Chaucer thought so much of it that he wrote a treatise on it. And it's quite an interesting thing. You have the most famous part of the astrolabe is this open work rete, which points to stars, and presumably you would have known about the stars in those days. Here's you in the center of the universe. This is a geocentric world, and the stars rotate around you on this grid. And it's a plumb bob, so by holding it, you can determine your reference angle. You can use the alidade to shoot your angle, to find the star that you know, and then come over to this side and locate it. And you've got a way to tell time, to discern where the zodiac is, to chart other star positions. And implicitly, the astrolabe also has behind it a grid of latitude plates. So behind this, you can change out in an astrolabe maybe 6 or 8 different plates. And this reflects the fact that if you change your position north-south on the globe, you'll get a different background against the stars and different stars, proving that the Earth is curved as opposed to flat. So, all right, in my hand, I'm holding a microcosm of the world. And the story that this is going to tell, similarly with the compass, is that this is used in the Islamic world, in the medieval Christian world, in the classic world, as kind of an example of the whole universe in the palm of your hand. It's an instrument for contentment. You can do your astrologies, you can orient your prayers toward Mecca in the Muslim world. So now what happens if we toss this instrument into the Western context? Well, first of all, you lose all the great science behind it. So you lose this geocentric view of the world. And so what then's left is this contraption becomes sort of a backward device symbolizing medieval learning. And now the new Vikings of Europe can come at it and plunder it for parts like golden fixtures in a temple. So what do we have that's still good? Well, an astrolabe implicitly determines latitude, so we can tell that. And it's got a measuring device, the alidade, here on the back. So if we use this simply as a tool and lose the famous rete, we have something like this. This is a Mariner's astrolabe. Okay, and you'll notice that it's the back of a regular astrolabe. Well, you've remembered your stars, and it's big, and it takes finding celestial bodies very seriously. It's big and heavy, open work, because you have to use it on a ship's deck. And it uses the principle of setting the reference angle as gravity, like the traditional astrolabe. It's a plumb bob, but only it's big and heavy. It took probably about 3 sailors to stabilize it, set the angle, and then read it. And you can determine, roughly speaking, latitude at sea, your distance north-south on the globe. However, it was so notoriously inaccurate that Magellan was said to have wanted to take his ship ashore and tie it to a tree to get an accurate reading. So, what then happens? Well, this famous instrument then gets reduced again into a sextant. So a sextant takes a fraction of the angle, just like the abbreviated form of the astrolabe, the quadrant, which takes one of those latitude plates and puts the sighting notch on it. So the sextant takes a fraction of the Mariner's astrolabe, 1/6, and you sight your celestial body, and you stare into a split screen, one with a mirror, one with the celestial body. But what's different about the sextant from the Mariner's astrolabe is the principal reference angle is an angle against the horizon rather than a plumb bob, because you can't have a good use of a plumb bob on a rocking ship, but it's a lot easier to find horizon. And not only that, but there's all kinds of horizon available on the open ocean, something there wasn't with an astrolabe. So this then becomes more obviously an instrument. Once the astrolabe is robbed of its divine significance, it's free to plunder for parts, and it reduces to this. So while this remained a cultural fossil for 2,000 years in the Islamic world, virtually unchanged, in the medieval world, virtually unchanged, and in the classical world, where it was invented, it remains largely the same. Yet within a few hundred years, the science behind it is delegitimated and it becomes a sextant. So that's an example of how an input doesn't automatically have the same effect in the same culture. Similarly, we could tell the exact same story with the astrolabe with this. This is a compass, but it's the compass the way it was primarily used by the people who invented the compass, the Chinese. And what you'll note here is rather than being a simple little navigational device, like we think of a compass, that the actual compass in this loop band is a very small part. So what is all of this in here? Well, like the astrolabe, it's a map of the cosmos and the characteristics of the cosmos. This compass is not meant to travel. It's meant to orient you and help you stay put in a more advantageous way. So this is a map of the cosmos in Chinese characters, red and black, that tells you the lines of force and the characteristics of the direction. So this is the principal use of the compass in China, whereas the principal use of the compass in the West was simply a direction finder. This is for crossing German lines in World War I. So both of these then give you examples of ancient ideas, ancient inputs, that did not have the same effect in the worlds into which they were thrown. They lose their divine significance, their icons of being content and oriented, their ability to show us our relationship with the cosmos, and they become, in the hands of the West, sort of instruments to conquer the world, like these two things. And that shows you, one of our big points, is that historical structures form different motivational environments. And in our book, we talk about these motivational environments to explain how the modern world happens in a big picture. In the next podcast, what I'd like to do is talk about our notions of rationality based on the questions that we're getting, which are excellent, and I want to just outline those briefly. Thanks.